30 Odd Minutes is sponsored in part by Digital Dowsing. Who are you powered by?
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities and explore everything from conspiracies to the just plain weird. Welcome to 30 Odd Minutes. If the truth is out there, we will find it. But only by sheer accident.
Yeah. Boy, good one.
Every time.
Nice landing. Where did we end up?
Ooh, a deep, spooky, dark, creepy woods.
I'm kind of scared.
You're scared. I have to leave here alone later, you know? I mean...
Ooh. Engine room, what's going on? Damage report.
I got a little bit of moss in the intakes, and don't feel bad. I got to walk out of here alone tonight.
Huh. Wait a minute. This is creepy. Well, there's nothing to fear in the woods, right? Except...
Oh, monsters.
Monsters to fear in the woods.
That's damn right.
And it's a great topic because I love monsters. I think we'll probably first introduce them through Hollywood or cartoons.
Sure.
But you find out these things have roots. They run deep, very deep, which is why we know about them.
And some of them may be real.
That's the kicker, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we're really going to talk about tonight is how do we define reality? Because if you're walking in the woods and you see a 8-foot-tall, hairy, upright creature...
That's reality right then and there.
Yeah, that's reality for you. And someone else could say, you're mistaken, you're full of it. But, hey, man, you know what you saw, right?
That's right.
That's what we're going to talk about. So I think we should just get to it.
Sure.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this. Monsters. They lurk in the water, on the land, and even in the skies. Our folklore is filled with stories of strange creatures that have made their way into Hollywood movies and our collective psyches. But are they more than just stories? Tonight's guest is here to tell us they just may be. She's the author of over a dozen books, including The Beast of Bray Road and Real Wolfmen. She's appeared on countless television and radio shows, and tonight she's here to talk with us about her latest work, American Monsters, a history of monster lore, legends, and sightings in America. Please welcome back to the mothership, Linda S. Godfrey.
Hey, welcome back, Linda.
Hello, thanks for having me back, guys.
I'm so excited to talk about this because we've talked to you about the Beasts of Bray Road, we've talked to you about werewolves, and we can touch on that a little bit tonight. But we're gonna cast the net a little bit wider and talk about things that, for lack of a better term, we're going to label as monsters, right? Now,
exactly.
There's a great quote. The book's wonderful. It's like this whole collection, almost like an encyclopedia of various stories, folklore, legend, and, of course, sightings all over America. And many of these things, of course, have been seen all over the world, but your focus is America. There's a great quote by Mike Carey and Peter Gross. It said, "We make our own monsters, then fear them for what they show us about ourselves." And I thought, that's really great. You know, that's a great quote because... What is a monster anyway?
Yeah.
You know, how much power does it have? It has what we give it, correct?
From our deep fears.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's start with the air, because you've broke the book into 3 sections: air, land, and sea. Let's start in the air with one of my favorite legends, the Jersey Devil. Can you give us the quick overview of this wonderful legend?
Well, the Jersey Devil was supposed to have started way back in the 1700s when a woman's 13th child was cursed. And as soon as it was born, it devoured the family, escaped into the Pine Barrens, and then lived on until 1909, when suddenly it began rampaging around New Jersey. And there was a whole busload of tourists that saw it at one time. Policemen were firing at it. Police were getting in the fire stations to hose it with the pressurized hoses. And nobody could catch it. And the weird thing was that it looked like an amalgam of about 8 different animals. It had the body of a kangaroo. It had bat-like wings. It had a head like a horse. It had hooves like goat or cow. And it was just this completely mysterious creature.
Right. Now, here's the thing. You can say a creature that's a conglomerate of all those crazy things, it must just be a story. Everybody's confused. Yeah. It's all made up, whatever. But here's what, to me, is actually really compelling and powerful. New Jersey has a professional hockey team. Here they are, right? The Jersey Devils. this story is so powerful that it's become a mascot for an NHL professional hockey team. And I think some people just don't even think about where that comes from. It comes from this amazing story that doesn't go away there in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Even though you can say this doesn't make any logical sense, that the 13th baby would be all these animals, right, and then fly out and kill everybody, and then still get seen today, right, Linda? I mean, the sightings didn't end in 1909, right?
Right, exactly. They still go on, not only in New Jersey, but they show up in Tacoma, Washington as something known as bat squatch. They show up in Wisconsin as the man bat. They show up as all kinds of odd animals all around the country, and different people have their different names for them. But they're essentially that furry center body with the bat wings, and they fly around. They've even been seen over downtown Chicago.
So to me, that's really interesting because we've looked at various Sasquatch legends in the past, right? And sometimes this creature, by the same exact description, turns up in different places with different names, like the Ohio Grassman.
Right.
Right? By all accounts, Sasquatch, right? Or the Monster of Coca-Cola Ledge, one of my favorites in Massachusetts. But still a Sasquatch creature.
Or the skunk ape.
The skunk ape, right, yeah. I mean, this thing comes up again and again. And so, Linda, what is it? Why do you think it's other parts of the country want to own a piece of that? And they say, well, I saw it here too, all the way on the other side of the country in Washington State. Or do you think this creature's really getting around?
I think all of these monstrous creatures seem to have the power to show up where they want to. It never seems like it's the witness wanting to bring it forth. It's always a random, accidental, usually very brief sighting of these creatures. And I think they just get around and show up for reasons unbeknown to us, and then people see them and report them, and eventually, lots of times they don't even know that these creatures are seen in other parts of the world until it just, they happen upon it. And it's the same with every single one of these types of monsters.
So are they real?
Well, it depends on what real means. Some people accept only the definition of a flesh and blood, living, breathing animal as real. Other people say, well, it may be something that has flown in from another dimension. It doesn't mean it's less real than the things that are already in this dimension. And still other people think it's some type of a manifested earth spirit, not to get too, airy-fairy on you there for theories, but there are actually quite a few researchers that are going to that description because it's just, there's no other way to explain all the weird things that happen with these creatures.
Let's take Sasquatch for a minute, because this is one of those creatures where, we've heard lots of paranormal accounts over the year, right? Ghost sightings, UFO sightings. The interesting thing to me about Sasquatch or Bigfoot sightings is that it's often, of course, there's the famous, the
Daddy.
Yeah, right. The sightings are often go something like this. I'm a hunter. I hunted in these woods for 20 years. I know every creature that's supposed to be here. I saw this thing that doesn't belong, 8 feet tall. It walked by and then was gone.
Right.
I saw the footprints and no sign of it.
Very common sighting for Bigfoot.
And it's not like, the person's shaken up only in the sense that, like, I've never seen this animal before. Right. But it's not like a ghost sighting where someone goes, whoa, there's life after death. It changes my whole outlook.
Yeah.
Or, a UFO sighting where you say, we're not alone in the universe. This is just like some creature, obviously, we missed.
Somehow.
But yet we don't find dead ones. We don't find, bodies. People take shots at these things. And I remember I was once talking to, who was I talking to? A paranormal researcher. Who was saying it. He said, I think Bigfoot's a lot more paranormal than any of us are comfortable with.
And I agree with that statement myself.
And so it's one of those things that, Linda, what are your thoughts as far? Let's talk about Sasquatch for a second, who appears in almost all 50 states, right? I'm not sure if there's an exception.
Right, and even southeastern Wisconsin. And the thing is, I've gotten Bigfoot reports for 22 years. Right from the beginning when people started reporting the upright wolf-like creatures to me, they were also sending me Bigfoot reports. And I think that many people have told me that it did change their whole worldview, their paradigm of things, just like the UFOs or seeing a ghost, because they know this is something that, according to science, should not be. And yet it is. And they've seen it, they've smelled it, they've experienced it. I saw what I believe was a Bigfoot tearing a 35-foot long, 9-inch limb off a living oak tree right in front of my eyes in the Kettle Moraine. And that's something with tremendous power. It's hard to believe that a mere spirit could do it. And yet it's also more strength and power than you'd expect from any sort of living creature to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So when you saw that, and you were filming an episode of Monster Quest right at that point, right? Is that when the sighting happened?
No, actually, this was 2 years ago in the Kettle Moraine. I was by myself. I was just taking a walk, was not expecting anything. And I just, for some reason, I took it into my head to try banging on a tree. And I've never done that before, but it was almost like this thought went in my head, and I went over and banged this tree. And then a few hundred feet in front of me, going right up from a kettle, was this giant oak tree. It was covered in heavy foliage, very heavy foliage. But I could hear something moving around, and then all of a sudden, this branch was ripped in two separate motions with this huge cracking sound. And I could see that it was a living tree. It was green-leaved. The wood I could see was fresh. It didn't look like an old saw-cut thing or woodpecker holes. And the first motion, it was moved horizontally, torn from the tree. And then in the second motion, until it was actually pointing right at me, and in the second motion, it was ripped down and dropped 40 feet to the bottom of the kettle floor. And at that point, I knew there was something really big and weird and strong. I ran, but I came back half an hour later with friends. We went down and measured and made sure that it was not a rotten log. It was actually living. We smelled the most horrible, pungent smell and it's just like they describe. It's somewhat skunk-like, but not a skunk. It was just really, really hard to forget. I still have part of the bark that was rubbed off. There were two spots where 9-inch mitten-like prints where something had grabbed opposite sides of the limb and just pulled that limb were still there. I've got lots of good pictures. And then my friend's 21-year-old daughter, who does not believe in Bigfoot, knows nothing about them, she was the one who got to see it. She saw it disappearing in some foliage in an adjacent kettle. And my friend and I were too late, turned our heads like a second too late, because she saw it striding behind this bunch of foliage. But then it growled. We all heard it growling at us from maybe 30 feet away. And then we all left.
So how does the skeptic feel now about the Bigfoot legend?
Oh, well, she saw it with her own eyes, and seeing is believing. There was nothing else that could have been. There was just not, it was not possible. It was much bigger than a human. She said, she described it as, and she was groping for words, and she finally said it was striding very fast. And that actually is a word that many eyewitnesses will use because it takes these long, smooth steps.
Now, what's interesting to me about that description is, what you're talking about, Linda, is a flesh and blood creature that broke a tree branch in front of you.
Yeah. And it's still, the branch is still there. I go back, and I have the bark, and the bark still has the faintest bit of smell because it was so pungent, from where it was. Imagine the strength it would take to just rip, and it was 9 inches in diameter where it joined the tree, 40 feet up in the tree, and to leverage itself and turn that, the tension, the strength that it would have taken. Yeah, it's these are not little kittenish type creatures.
And does that make you uncomfortable knowing a creature like that is close by?
A little bit. I did not sleep that night because I live about 5 miles from the Kettle Moraine State Forest. And it was, I just was completely psyched up because in my 22 years of following these creatures, I've only had what was possibly a part of a man-wolf sighting for any other weird creature. And this is the first time I actually came face to face with one of these unknown monsters. And, I was alone there. It probably could have rushed down and gotten me if it had wanted to. And knowing that made it even scarier.
But here's the thing, though, and our skeptic friends will point out, but we don't find dead ones. We don't find a body. Had you had a rifle, arguably you could have shot the thing, right?
Well, maybe. I belong to the no-kill camp.
No,
I think
I agree.
Anything that looks that much like a human you don't know what it is. And as I always tell people who ask me, I say, if you don't know what it is and you're a good, well-educated hunter, you won't shoot it unless you really think it's about to kill you. And then, of course, you have self-defense. I wasn't that close. But that question about where are the bodies, where are the good pictures, that's been plaguing and puzzling cryptozoologists since long before I started. And it is a good question. But, the rejoinder is always that, well, how many times are you walking in the forest and you find a skeleton of, say, a cougar or a bear or some other apex predator? There aren't very many of them because in any given area they need a huge territory all to themselves. And then anytime something is killed in a woods, there's a whole legion of large and little creatures that will come in and just sort of rip it to shreds, and it's gone before you know it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, too, and this is to Linda's point earlier. If cryptozoologists want this to be just a flesh and blood creature we haven't categorized yet, simple. It's just a primate.
Right.
We haven't found one, but we will. Or, like Linda said earlier, what if this thing is interdimensional? What if it's ET? What if it's some kind of spirit that's allowed to come into our world, alter it to the point of ripping a branch off, and then leaving, and that's another reason.
Just stepping through some sort of doorway, so to speak.
And you don't find a dead one. And that makes everyone uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, well, wait a minute. The cryptozoologists just want to say it's animals. We're going to find another coelacanth. That's all it is, And then there's the people like us that might be a little more open-minded.
That's right. Might be something else.
And then it gets woo-woo.
Yep.
And so poor Bigfoot is left hanging in between the two worlds,
Yeah, and open-minded, I think, is the key, Jeff. And that's how I try to stay. Because if the minute we stop and declare for sure that we know what it is, when we really don't, we've stopped investigating. We're just really confirming our own biases, whatever those might be. So I like to leave the door open either way. And actually, some of my Native American friends have the best paradigm. I've talked to elders from different tribes in different parts of the country. And what I've heard the most often is that they believe these things are originally spirit creatures that can come through the doorway or the portal or whatever you want to call it and do what they need to do when they're here. They're fully corporeal as they want to be. They can have babies. They must eat. They leave droppings. They can tear trees apart. But then when maybe it's when they feel they're going to die. Maybe it's when they are in a tough situation and need to get away. They know where that doorway is, and they can head back into their own spirit world.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Possibilities
endless. Okay, Linda, hang with us for just a minute. We're going to take a break for the news, and when we're going to come back, we're going to get into sea and more land monsters. We'll be right back after this.
A photograph taken recently in Cumbria, England, has some wondering if the Loch Ness Monster has moved 150 miles south. A photographer named Ellie Williams had set up her camera to take a series of time-lapse photographs on the scenic shores of Lake Windermere, located in an area known as the Lake District. Later, when Miss Williams reviewed the shots that had been taken throughout the day, she noticed something strange in one of the pictures. There appeared to be a large object floating in the lake. She said her first thought was that it might be a goose or a swan, but when she brought the image up to view on a larger screen, she was shocked to discover that the object looks rather like a lake monster. Folks have been telling tales of a monster lurking in this lake for some time now, and there have been several sightings reported since 2006. Locals have named the beast Bo'Nessie. The Lake District has many legends about ghosts, boggles, and fairies. It is also the dwelling place for a magical creature known to many as Peter Rabbit. I'm Andrew Lake, and oddly enough, that's the news.
Peter Rabbit.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Get out of here.
Yep.
Beatrice Potter?
Beatrice Potter, that's right, the Lake District.
She lives right there. Linda, had you seen that recent photo of the lake monster in England, in Cumbria?
I did not see that. No, I missed it.
It just came out. I know it's not America, but I mean, again, these creatures, lurk all over. It's so good. The photo is so good.
My guess is some locals made a very good floating sculpture and stuck it out in the pond to let it just float around for a little while, and then they pulled it back ashore. And and then ran off and had a good laugh.
Or Photoshop or whatever.
Yeah.
It's so tough because the technology is so good today to fake these things. You see these photos, you want to believe, you want to say like, wow, that's an amazing capture, but at the same time, unless you're there,
right,
so tough to tell. And Linda, I'm sure you've run into that when you're working on when you were working on American Monsters. People tell you their tales and they sound believable, but at the end of the day, you just have to say, well, I'm just reporting, right?
Right, and I do try and vet people's stories and check their backgrounds out, and sometimes I'll ask them outright, if they're telling me the truth or lying. I'll make some of them sign statements legally declaring that they are giving me a statement of fact, and most of the witnesses, I'd say that probably the high 90 percentile, I believe are sincere. I know there's always those couple of little trickster-minded hoaxers in there. So I'm always aware of that. But by and large, I think the people who manage to come to find me and come to me with their reports are sincere and truthful.
Any discoveries when working on this book, Linda, that even made you say, this is just the weirdest monster I've ever heard of?
Yeah. Did you read about the Gator Man?
No. It's funny. I did read about the frog people. In Bethel, Connecticut, which is funny because I grew up in the next town over from Bethel, Connecticut, and
really?
And living there, I'd never heard of them. I'd never heard of them until I had moved far away and read about them in Weird U.S. and then, of course, in your book. But tell us about Gator Man.
Yeah, Gator Man is a creature of the St. Johns River in Florida on the eastern coast, and this river was already famous for a monster known as Pinky because it was a pink-colored dolphin that was spotted here and there. It's also known for manatees. And I received this communication from a young man who is actually in the zoological sciences and studying, works at a paleontological museum, and is out on the riverways a lot. And he was out one day when he came across this creature that he noticed because it was a gator, and yet it wasn't like any gator he'd ever seen. Instead of the normal flat, smooth back head that most gators have, this had a rounded skull like a very ancient type. It had really unusual mouth and fangs and tooth arrangement that he'd never seen. And he's looking at it, and it comes up out of the water and slowly emerges. And when it gets out of the water, it stands up, and he realizes that it's got arms and legs that are not just these little things appendages that you see on a regular gator. They were strong enough to hold it up. They were much longer than the arms and legs. And scariest of all, it seemed focused right on him. And this was several years. He's had continuing experiences where it's attacked his boat. It's followed him home to his own dock. It has sort of menaced him. It reminds me of Peter Pan and Captain Hook with that crocodile with ticking clock inside it following him around. And he's really quite frightened of it. I did check him out. He checks out in every way. He did want to remain anonymous because he plans a career in this field, and he feels that it might adversely affect his doctoral chances and that sort of thing.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Now, Linda, isn't the Gator Man also responsible for gnawing on people's cars, too? Having them make cars destroyed in the area with teeth marks?
Well, there's a lizard man.
I'm getting the wrong crypto. Okay.
There's a lizard man who was known for attacking someone's car, and I think that was the one of Bishopville, North Carolina, perhaps, that you're thinking of.
Okay.
And there have been other lizard men. Lizard men are fairly widespread too, wider spread than you would think.
And why is that? I mean, this is freaky stuff. This is science fiction stuff. And yet these things are turning up, like you said, all over. And we live in an age, and this is something else, you can't understate this enough. The internet age has changed everything when it comes to monsters and legends. It wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, these stories just couldn't spread this fast. And now it's minutes.
Well, when I started out, it was 91, 92 at the newspaper when I broke the story of the Beast of Bray Road, and people had to actually look up the newspaper's snail mail and write me a letter, either on a typewriter or by hand. in order to get a hold of me. And they still did. It's sort of a testament to the power of these stories and how much they wanted them to be out there. And the thing was, I wrote a few little updates, but there was no way to really get those stories out. I had to write my first book about it, The Beast of Bray Road, in order to help people understand how many of these encounters there had been and how widespread they were. If that had been the days of the internet, it would have been far different. And I think, I probably would have had a website right away, and it might have gone in a much different direction.
Right, yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where I know people want to become part of the story, so they want to have their own experiences, and now people go looking for them. We've led some of these expeditions, right? People want to have that experience so badly, they go and seek this stuff out. And when you look, sometimes you find, and maybe sometimes you're mistaken. Of course, it's all part of it. I want to go to the sea real quick because giant squid and Kraken legends, are wonderful. They go back so long, but they're still coming up today. And what did you find when you were looking at some of the ocean creatures?
Well, yeah, the Kraken's interesting. For a long time, people thought that was just myth, that there was this giant octopus or squid-like creature big enough to, glom onto a boat and pull it under the waves. And then we find that in fairly modern times, the colossal squid and the giant squid carcasses started washing up on beaches, and people could actually find them and measure them and say, yeah, these creatures are real. Certainly they could have been around for ocean-going sea vessels in the 1500s and 1600s, and definitely would have, scared the bejabbers out of any sailors who saw one of those out in the high seas. Yeah, there's that photo just surfaced this past week. I believe that one is in New Zealand, but still, I mean, these creatures are immense, and if the boats are small enough, that creature could conceivably pull it right under. Sure. They go. Davy Jones locker time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the power of all of these things. Now, I know that the upright canines and the Beast of Bray Road has a soft spot in your heart. Have you found a new favorite now somewhere in America? Something else that you're just like, boy, this story just really speaks to me and I want to know more?
Well, one thing that I was really intrigued with was a certain lake, going back to the water monsters as long as we're on those. Flathead Lake in Montana has had over 102 sightings now recorded since 1898, and these aren't just a generalized conglomeration by anybody. These are compiled by a man, Laney Hansel, who was a wildlife specialist on the lake, who compiled these things over his entire career, and he actually lent me one of his maps that he made of the sightings. And this is just reported sightings, but just think about it. One lake, over 102 sightings of this long-necked, bumpy-backed creature. And they're compiled by a fishing expert and a water expert, a scientist. So I find that really, really compelling.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that, the evidence continues to come in, and especially in our internet age where people are saying, hey, I post this picture on Facebook or on Twitter, like, look at what I just saw, and suddenly it goes viral and we're all talking about it, and it's an amazing thing. The book's called American Monsters, A History of Monster Lore, Legends, and Sightings in America by Linda S. Godfrey. Linda, very excited to have you back and talk about these things. You're such a great resource on all of these, and I understand, from reading your book how one monster tends to lead to another, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like eating potato chips. No one can research just one.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing about the paranormal, and that's the thing about reality. At the end of the day, how do we find reality?
Yeah.
I think to me, the simple definition is perception is reality.
Right.
When you're the individual witness, when you perceive something and you say, I have no word but Sasquatch, I have no word but werewolf, that's your reality.
Yeah.
And that's our reality. And our reality is we are out of time. Linda, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, my friends, stay odd.
Thank you. Bye.